Y'all, I got some news. Yup, I folded. I finally folded, and I'm reading the One Piece manga. I've always wanted to, but it's a very, very long story, and a few things about it just made me feel sort of like uninterested in it as a whole, or at least not interested enough to actually commit to it. You know, it's been a good while now. People always say it's so good, but something about the vibes it gives off just didn't ever really resonate with me that much. Something about the visuals, and it's kind of an interesting paradox because I feel like One Piece aesthetically is a bunch of things I love, done in a way that didn't particularly attract me. You know, I love stories about adventuring, especially if they're of the seafaring variety. I love pirates, I love found family stories, I love battle shonen anime, of course. Y'all know I love battle shonen anime. I love the subtle political themes in stories. And One Piece has all that. I've heard One Piece has all that, which is why people keep saying, oh, you're gonna love One Piece, you're gonna love One Piece. So like, yeah, this does look interesting, but I don't know, it feels weird just simply chalk it up to the art style. But I really don't know if I can properly explain One Piece's sort of weird aura looking outside in, at least for me. I'm not about to say like, oh, it isn't good. There's definitely mastery on display here when it comes to the character designs and the art style. It's some well-produced stuff. And even though I enjoy, you know, silly, fun stuff, I like to think I'm a silly, fun guy myself, you know? If I didn't, I probably wouldn't be so much into animated media and whatnot, just in general. But personally, my preference when it comes to, you know, sillier stuff is more of the cute and endearing variety. And when it comes to stylization, I like something that looks a bit cooler, a bit sleeker, over the top, sure, but, you know, that I guess sort of edge to it. And One Piece's pirate clowns, Pinocchio noses, and ludicrous fan service boobies felt way more goofy to me than cool or cute or endearing. It always just felt a bit weird to look at from the outside in. Which, you know, if you're doing a straight up comedy is fine, but maybe this sort of visual style and identity isn't necessarily what I want from this kind of story, you know? Either way, people kept saying it was great and stuff, and a lot of it looked to my liking still, so I folded. But I decided to take it slowly. I would read the manga because the anime is way too damn slow for its own good, and I would just read, you know, like 2 chapters a day, maybe, on my phone, whenever I had free time. I'm on a line, or I'm, you know, in a waiting room, or I'm like out running or something, then I sit down for a second, pick up my phone, instead of doom scrolling on Twitter, I'll read some One Piece. Sure, why not? I'm trying not to make it too much of a big commitment, because I know it's a huge story, and if I try to rush through it, I'll just put too much of my time into it and get tired really quickly. So I decided to take this approach, which means I've been reading for a few months now, and I'm right now in chapter 112. And I can gladly say it's pretty great. You guys were right. The moment I realized it was probably around the end of chapter 7, where Luffy and Zoro say goodbye to Kobe, and they do that thing where Luffy tricks the Marines into kicking them out without letting them know that Kobe is their friend. And even then, the Marines make sure to salute them in their way out for helping them out. That's when I noticed, okay, there are some feels in here, there are some vibes. This is gonna be a pretty interesting and pretty emotional story with good plot beats. And in general, I feel like if there's one thing One Piece does really right, at least at the point I'm at, is endings. And like, as far as, you know, ending certain arcs or certain portions of the story, whenever the characters have to say goodbye or move away from some island or the place they're staying at for, you know, a certain amount of chapters, it always feels like it's done in a very smart and poignant way, where it just leaves you feeling, yeah, that was a great adventure. I remember reading chapter 7 and then immediately going to my friends being like, okay, actually, yeah, this is peak, you guys were right. And they're like, this is just the beginning, dude, you have seen nothing. And like, for as annoying as Usopp's lying can be, the way they contextualize it in the ending of his introductory arc really made it emotionally satisfying and paid off tenfold for sure. And that's not even talking about the end of Arlong Park with the whole perfect weather for a pinwheel to spin thing. Like, Jesus, that's so good. Speaking of Arlong Park, one thing that I realized the series is pretty good at is giving characters interesting and sometimes nuanced individual stories. Pretty much everyone has either a really cool backstory or some interesting development that seems to be, you know, setting itself up for some really cool conclusions. My favorite so far is probably Zoro's, because not only is he a really cool swordsman guy with a goal of becoming the best, which is also, you know, cool and badass and really over-the-top stupid anime kind of way that I love, but his backstory, I feel like out of the main crew, is probably the most, maybe not necessarily relatable to me, but the one that just feels the most legit and genuine to me. I can't really even tell you why, just something about it. His story just particularly resonated with me. And again, the whole shonen perseverance thing. Okay, right now Mihawk is way stronger than Zoro, but you get some Dante Virgil vibes from that dynamic. I think they're gonna have some really cool sword fights later on. Y'all, no, don't spoil me on that, but you know, just nod in agreement if that's true over there where you're watching. And funnily enough, even though I usually tend to really like this kind of overly energetic, optimistic adventurers character, especially, you know, like these protagonists, shonen protagonists, Luffy is not my favorite character. Again, I think Zoro not only has the best backstory and growth, I think he's just, as of right now, my favorite one so far. He's just the coolest, and he can still be fun while keeping a generally level enough head for me to find him maybe just a little bit easier to keep up with. Whereas Luffy, despite checking all the boxes for a character I love, you know, superficially, I don't find him that relatable, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was just something I found interesting, because when I went in, I was like, oh yeah, of course I'm gonna like Luffy. But, like, I know he isn't supposed to be dumb per se, but Luffy is just kind of an enigma to me. He genuinely cares and is more aware of stuff than he lets on. Sometimes he's single-mindedness, so to speak, on food, and the fun side of pirating is played straight, and he genuinely just has no idea what's going on half the time. He always gets the team in trouble and is always causing issues because he's just, he's just so dumb, right? But at other times, he just Uno reverse card stuff and does something really, really, really clever under the guise of sounding naive. Again, it is cool, it's not a bad character trait. It's just kind of hard for me to get into his head, if that makes any sense. I don't know what's going through the boy's mind half the time, to be honest. And that distinction, while making him cool in a different way, kind of pushes him away from my absolutely favorite character spot, just because I kind of haven't pinned him down quite yet as far as understanding what his deal is, right? I'm just looking at him and I'm seeing him stumble through everything and somehow making it work and somehow being cool either way. And he's still my second favorite character, but he's not an absolute favorite and not one I'm as obsessed with as I thought I would initially. He might change and mature later, but just as an example of a character who's sort of similar to him, in that she's kind of energetic and adventurous and sort of naive like him, Tingle from the Sonic comics is one that I find way more relatable. Let's look at a particular example. There's this one scene in one of the comics where she supports one of her friends through like a trauma thing she vents about, and is very emotional, and she's genuine and appreciating of her and just talks straight, doesn't like try to mince things. She just conversates like a normal human being, which makes you feel like, oh, despite this character being so quote-unquote childish, no, she's actually caring enough and mature in her own way. Meanwhile, Luffy, I think he would figure it out and he would try to make her feel better in that scenario, but instead of, you know, just giving her a pep up and like listening to her and you know, saying he's sorry for what happened, he would pull the exact same thing he did in Arlong Park and just say, fuck it, I don't want to know your backstory, and somehow spin that into making her actually feel good. Otherwise, he would listen, and instead of just being generally supportive, he would do a weird, unorthodox rationalization of it that would somehow make her feel better, while sounding completely weird and off the wall in his own unique way, which again makes Luffy a cool character, especially for what he represents as far as being like this symbol of freedom and positivity in a way that's very unique. It's just kind of hard for me to see him as a genuine, multifaceted character. He feels a little bit too exaggerated for me to see him as like a human being, as opposed to being more of a symbol, which is very cool, just not what I expected at all. This is the part I'm at right now, where Zoro is finding all these sort of like mercenary bandits type people, and like Luffy is half asleep, literally just a ball thanks to all the food he ate, and like, I just wish he was more, not necessarily serious, but more involved. Like, I'm pretty sure that by now, Luffy hasn't had like a single serious extended conversation with like anyone in the entire series. Like, I'm sure I'm wrong at some points, but he barely like actually has any actual conversations or, you know, any serious discussions with anyone at any point in the series. He's just sort of always goofing around. Despite how much I like his and Zoro's bromanship, so to speak, I wish they actually bonded more and like talked more about their dreams and stuff, because it feels like they just defend each other on the basis of they're on the same crew, you know, a non-honor basis. I wish they got to see Luffy bonding with the crew more, so his devotion to them felt a little bit more, you know, genuine beyond, yeah, that's what a pirate does, right? But again, this is something that maybe will change later, or that I'll maybe get a bigger appreciation for as I go into the story and learn more about Luffy and what he's deal with. Because so far, like, I get his deal from a meta perspective, I don't get what's going on inside that head. I just think it's interesting how he's not my absolute favorite one. It's surprising. Everyone told you, oh, you're gonna love Luffy. He's exactly one of your characters. And yeah, he's cool. Not my favorite though. Yeah, this is a long story, and that's kind of one of the coolest things about it. One Piece is such a big tale that I'm sure it's gonna be investing in some way or another as I go, because there's so much room for growth, there's so much room for change, and there's so much room for adventuring and exploring. Conceptually, the idea of doing such a huge adventure story feels awesome, because you're seeing the life of these characters as they go each day and dealing with new silly or cool or threatening adventures as they go. And as a huge fan of long-ass JRPGs, I can definitely say that longer stories in general are really good at making you attach to the characters in a way that's very particular, and One Piece just like throws this on another level. It's rare that a story lasts so long without devolving into Simpson syndrome, but this is genuinely a linear adventure story that just happens to be that long, which is dope, if you ask me. You can imagine how cool it must have been to grow up alongside these characters, and I hope I'm able to, in a way, maybe even if I'm a bit late, to do the same thing as I go through it, which is why I'm not particularly worried about going through it as fast as possible. I want to grow up with the story, just like a lot of y'all probably did. I'm in the early hundreds as far as chapters go, and I'm just now got to the Grand Line, which is supposed to be like the main setting of the whole story. So we're only getting started here, really. And I'm so excited to see what's next. So y'all, you better stay tuned on this channel, because there's probably a really good chance that I'm gonna come back to One Piece in some way or another later on. And I'm sure I'm gonna have a lot more to talk about it as I see these characters grow, and as I see this story evolve, and I learn more about all the wondrous things they're gonna find in the Grand Line. And if you have any ideas on what characters or moments of One Piece I could talk about next, let me know in the comments below. That would be pretty damn helpful. So, thanks y'all for watching, and see y'all next time!